Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopton. And again, with the Biden administration, what's going on in the world, there's basically a plethora of things to talk about. And we'll tee it off with you, Dr. Lopton.
Yeah, the Biden administration's failures are racking up. And we've got a couple of them that have just come out. One of which is actually, the State Department talked about they've already gotten over 900 people out of Afghanistan. If you remember, there were only about 100 left behind, but they've gotten 900 out. So clearly they had no idea how many were left behind. And just breaking in the last few hours, it looks like Chuck Schumer is going to be punting the vote on the Build Back Better Act to next year because Manchin is standing firm. And the CBO came out earlier this year saying the real cost of this bill is going to add over $3 trillion to the deficit. Jen Psaki said, oh, no, that's a fake report. Yes, they're claiming fake news. Remember that term?
Fake news, yep.
Now the Democrats are claiming it's fake news, that it's going to add $3 trillion to the deficit. And between that and the PPI index that came out with 9.1% inflation this week, the highest inflation
actually
since
9.6, the highest since 1982, I believe.
Well, it's the highest since they started keeping the records. So it could even be higher, older than that. But between all of these, Biden's so-called accomplishments have been falling apart. And of course, Biden made a speech earlier in the week claiming the Republicans need to look out because he thinks the Democrats are going to win in the midterms.
And I think I'm going to play for the basically the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, of course. Dementia's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
It is. I actually have to wonder if his people are even showing him the current polls. I mean, you have polls where he has 71% disapproval ratings among independents, and yet he thinks the Democrats are going to pull out the midterms.
Well, I think that, that's, you can't really read that much into it because you're always going to have to, who's ever in charge, who's ever the party that's, in control, you have to, what is he going to say? It's over? I mean, I think they know it's over. They've already CNN, by the way, has already had a news piece talking about alternative. That's CNN, alternative. It is so over. It makes Jimmy Carter look like a rock star. I've never seen anything. This is not even a year into this.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing. No president in modern history has fallen so far so fast. And I think actually to find a president that did worse than this, you have to go back to William Henry Harrison, who died 30 days into his term.
Yeah, it's new grounds. I would have to interject one thing. As a conservative, I hope that that we have new people coming in, and I hope that Trump does not run. Because I think if he does not run, it is probably Reagan-esque in terms of the victory.
Yeah, if Trump does not run, because Trump is still, as many people want him, Trump is still very divisive, and just him being on the ballot will encourage Democrats and never Trumpers to come out and vote against him. However, We already know he's not on the ballot in the midterms, so that's going to be a non-starter.
True, but if you really want a complete victory, he needs to go away. Speaking of the potential next presidential election, Hillary, who I think needs to check in somewhere, we'll just leave it at that, gave her victory speech like the world's waiting for that. There's many political pundits that think she's posturing for 2024.
I'm sure she is, because she is also suffering from this massive delusion. She lost not because Trump was such a great candidate. Nobody even knew what Trump would be able to accomplish. She lost because she is the only person that the Democrats could have put up that was more divisive than Trump.
Exactly. The absolutely worst candidate ever. And if she runs again, the only thing I would say is Trump is so divisive, it may be the only opportunity to actually squeak one out. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But I mean,
I'm not even sure about that, because if you take a look at the polls, if Trump Biden went up against each other today, Trump very handily defeats him despite his divisiveness. Against Hillary, I think he would bury her. But honestly, I think if Hillary runs and she manages, first of all, I don't think she'd be able to get the nomination. I think the Democratic Party would stop her from getting the nomination again.
Agreed.
Because they know she can't win. But on the off chance that she could, against a Hillary candidacy for 2024, it doesn't matter who the Republicans put up. The Republicans can put up a complete unknown. As long as they don't put up Hitler, they win.
Pretty much correct. Now, speaking, I guess it does relate to the Democratic Party and the wokeism. A UPenn swimmer who's essentially, I believe, a man, but according to the Democrats, you're only basically a woman man. It's so hard, so convoluted. Who even knows? But he won all the swimming tournaments at UPenn or the Ivy League, and his quote was, "So easy, I was cruising."
Yeah,
is that the end of women's sports? Like, if
this is an absolutely ridiculous situation. This is a male swimmer who was doing well in men's swimming, but not at the top of the charts, took a year off, came back saying he identifies as a woman, and UPenn allowed him to swim on the women's team. He is breaking records, women's records. He is beating his competition by 36 seconds, which in swimming is an eternity.
You could have half a cigarette.
It is absolutely unacceptable that they are allowing him to compete as a woman. He is definitively a man.
He's a man.
And UPenn's, the women's swimmers have come out and said, yes, is it unfair that he's winning all of this? Yes. Is the coach going to do anything? No, because the coach likes winning and he doesn't care if it's a man or a woman giving him those victories. So basically, UPenn has essentially said, we don't care if we're cheating. We just want the win.
But I thought, there's a bastion of liberalism, the Ivy League. Don't they want to protect women and the underprivileged? I mean, it's kind of unfair to me.
You would think so, except we've seen this before. In Connecticut, there is a court case that high school female athletes have brought against the state for allowing men that identify as women to compete in women's sports. The fact of the matter is, men's and women's biology is different. And if you have not had transgender surgery, gender reassignment surgery early in your life, then you still have male biology. Caitlyn Jenner has come out and said, this is unacceptable. You cannot allow transgender males to compete in women's sports.
But what's the motivation? With liberalism, there's always a motivation. What is it? It's a very small percentage of the population that would even gravitate to that, but there's got to be a motivation. Any clues? I don't
Well,
have one.
again, we've
Or is it
always
just an
said
umbrella of wokeism?
it's partially an umbrella of wokeism. Partially, it is the liberals' tendency towards people who do not succeed on their own. If
Exactly, that's it.
if these transgender athletes could have won in their own gender's competition, they probably would not be competing in women's sports. And I mean, this is absolutely a monstrosity of a cataclysm for women's sports, because the people who have traditionally defended women's athletics, the folks that worked for Title IX and worked to get, you know, people's approval for women's sports, are now going, oh, well, we can't now discount the transgender. It's like, you know what? Yes, you can. If you are supporting transgenders switching and playing in women's sports, you are against feminism.
Agreed.
You are against women's rights.
Interesting on something that we've talked about for a while, CNN and their demise. Chris Wallace. Wow, and you talk about. I'm sorry, I never was impressed with him. I really wasn't. His father, Mike Wallace, an icon. How do you not end up on a network with Mike Wallace, your father, trying to promote you? Anyway, he's leaving Fox and he's going to CNN Plus. That's about in the same league as Carnivore Radio Plus.
Yeah, it absolutely amazes me. I mean, first of all, Chris Wallace's star has been on the wane
Goodbye.
since he hosted the presidential debate. He did such a bad job that people have been turning him off in droves ever since. But what actually gets to me about this is CNN can't get people to watch their network for free. They think they're going to get people to pay extra to subscribe to a streaming service where they're having their woke bullshit.
No, it's so Zucker, a complete genius. You have ratings that are below sea level, and you think that's like ESPN having CNN streaming. That's fine. I get it. CNN Plus, that's like, I don't know, like that is there's no focus on reality. I mean, what are you, crazy? It's like having the Petticoat Junction Plus channel. It's like three
It is,
viewers.
there is some measure of an idea there, because clearly as the ratings drop, they're having a harder and harder time getting advertisers because they're not delivering an audience. If they make the audience pay for it, then at least they're getting some revenue. Now, I think in terms of streaming in general, we've seen far too many streaming services come out over the last several years. And I think most of them are going to start falling by the wayside. I mean, we have Apple Plus, AMC Plus, BritBox. You're going to see these start to merge. And I think, the best thing Netflix can do is actually buy up a couple of these streaming services and incorporate them. I don't think CNN Plus has any chance of getting above water, but it's a Hail Mary play on the part of CNN. Streaming is getting bigger. Their ratings are in the toilet, and let's face it, they're unless they do a complete overhaul, if they clean house, bring in actual reporters for CNN, and really start focusing on unbiased news, which I'm not even sure there's anyone there that remembers how to do that. But unless they do that, their ratings are going to continue to drop. And this
I,
is
I,
a
I,
last gap effort to get some revenues coming in.
I think in a nutshell, the question really is who is going to pay a premium for Don Lemon? Hello. Anyway, speaking of CNN, uh, increasing scandals. There's a lot of talk that Zucker, our good buddy, may be on, let's just not even say thin ice, but maybe even no ice at this point.
Yeah, he's treading water at best at this point. The ice is broken and he's trying to keep his head above water. Um, the scandals keep coming. Yeah, they fired Chris Cuomo. Turned out not only was he helping his brother sort of skate on the accusations of sexual harassment, he has sexual harassment charges against him. Don Lemon has sexual harassment charges actually pending in court. And now they found out that one of Chris Cuomo's staffers has sexual harassment charges against him. These cases just keep piling up. And my question though is, where is the Me Too movement in all of this?
Oh no, because of Me Too's. Oh no, no. That's what I was gonna say. Is it's so hypocritical. CNN, protector of women, protector of the weak. I bet the environment was a predatory a la 1970, 80 environment.
Oh, clearly it was, because you keep having people, they're dropping like flies. People keep saying, "Oh yes, he did sexual harassment. And this one did sexual harassment. And this one did sexual harassment." And now Jeff Zucker, the buck has to stop with him because he's the one who ran all of this.
Well, ran is an operative word. Like the Mr. Smith, I believe, the captain of the Titanic, he ran that too. So Harris, so Biden's bad enough.
Speaking of Titanics,
yes, is also basically had a couple of reports on replacements to Biden. They did a news report, but Harris now is appointed to. God, I would sell my stock on Tesla. In Tesla, she was appointed to electric car czar. That's what you want if you're an electric car manufacturer, having the girl genius in charge of your operation. She had no clue what she was doing, and it's so creepy. It was kind of funny, when you're in college and you got smoked a couple joints, whatever. You're laughing. I mean, she's well into her 50s, and it's like this laughing thing is getting really old. Like if you don't know what you're doing, you just laugh. It's like a big pot party.
Yeah, she can't seem to stop that laughter. The video of her trying to charge an electric car, well, in some ways it was funny, but in some ways it was just sad. She showed she had no idea what she was doing, and let's face it, again, she was that rising star. Oh, she ticks off the boxes for the Democratic Party, but now everybody is seeing the press completely failed to vet her. The Biden administration completely failed to vet her. She failed on trying to charge this electric car. They put her in charge of the border, as borders are, and the president
she hasn't talked to the president of Guatemala
since June,
like maybe 8 months ago or whatever.
Yeah, he said they spoke last when she went down there in June, and she's done absolutely nothing ever since. So yeah, she has staffers leaving, and not just leaving, because let's face it, every president, vice president has turnover in their staff. But these folks are leaving and they're talking to the press about how badly she's running her office. And on top of that, Democratic and analysts have come out and said, if you're working for the vice president, no matter how bad it is, you stick it out because you think they're next in line for the presidency. So for these people to be bailing, they have to know that the party is never going to put her up for president because she's just too incompetent.
No question about it. She also had an interview about Justice Smollett about the trial because she was big about tweeting about it's a modern day lynching. And it was so awkward when someone pressed her on it after the verdict. Again, she did the laughter thing, looking at other. It's so awkward and scary. I mean, and you talk about checking the. No, she only checked one box or two. Everything that was dealing with competency, no check mark. Woman, African American, 2 checks. That was the end. Identity politics was the check. Competency had no bearing on the decision whatsoever.
No, they ticked off because they said, well, this way we can put Biden in and still keep the radicals in the left in line because we're putting one of them in the second spot and we'll be able to make her president. Well, they didn't look at her competency. I mean, even in the state of California, she was given her positions. So she never built up a solid base in California. So she's got no base to fall back on. Nobody is defending her except the left, the radical left, and CNN and MSNBC. It is absolutely incomprehensible that we have gone so far out of whack that it is more important for you to tick off boxes than it is to find somebody that is qualified to run. And
you know something to lock in, though? Qualifications are sometimes a matter of interpretation, but there is no matter of interpretation. Unless you're on the moon, she has zero competency. I'm shocked that she actually got out of law school. That's another issue of Carnivore Radio. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, but my God.
It is amazing. And what I find really amusing is that if you go back to our broadcasts during 2020, we often talked about how Pete Buttigieg was more qualified than Biden, and she is. That Amy Klobuchar was much more qualified than either Biden or Harris. And now you're seeing the Democratic Party starting to rely on those two. They couldn't back them, when it mattered, but now they're like, oh, we made a big mistake. We got to go back. Now, Mayor Pete, who is not nearly as qualified as we thought he was, is now getting, is basically a spokesperson for the Democrats. They're leaning on Klobuchar very heavily in the Senate, but the Senate, they've essentially, gotten themselves stuck because the Senate still has real moderate Democrats in it. And in the Senate, of course, it's a 50-50 split. The Democrats never got the majority they thought they were going to, and they have found it very difficult to get anything passed because these guys do not want this leftist bull because they want to keep their jobs. And their constituents, they're not going to vote for them if they, cave to the left.
100% agree. And you talk about Chucky Schumer punting the ball till next year in terms of build back better and all that crap. I believe when you punt the ball in politics, you've basically conceded.
Well, there's a poll.
No punting of the ball.
Yeah, there was a poll that 61% of registered voters in West Virginia do not want Build Back Better to pass. Well, that is Manchin's constituency, not the liberals in Washington, not the liberals in California and New York. His constituency is West Virginia, and they have told him loud and clear they don't want this bill passing.
Oh no, if he acquiesces, and he will be committing political suicide. It would be check, please, done. I think if I was a political strategist for him, I think he needs to do a major speech and basically switch sides. That the party, I didn't leave the party, they left me. I think he could be a hero.
I would tweak that a little bit. I don't think he should switch sides. I think he should leave the Democratic Party, but I think he should stay an independent and caucus with the Republicans.
Much like our buddy from Vermont.
Well, yeah, he's an independent that caucuses with the Democrats, but I think it's more along the lines of Senator Joe Lieberman, who the party turned its back on him, and he left the party, became an independent, beat the Democrats, and stayed in the seat. And he was a true independent. And I think that's the model that Manchin needs to follow. And possibly Sinema as well.
Now, I guess maybe possibly our two little last little segments. It sounds weird, but it's not weird that deers, the animal deers, Bambi, there's like over 50% coronavirus infection rate. Why does that matter? Is basically you're talking about it's basically crossed to the, if you will, animal kingdom. So this thing is going to be around essentially forever, and in a way supports some of the red state governors' assertions all along. You can't just beat this thing by locking down. You're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, remember, COVID-19 started in the animal kingdom.
Of course it did, yes.
Even if it came from the lab, the original virus was still found in bats. So the fact that it crosses species really shouldn't surprise anybody. But what this means is it doesn't matter if you get 100% vaccination rates, because it's still not going to kill the virus. The virus is always going to have somewhere to go to mutate. But if you look at the hospitalization rates, if you look at the death rates are down. Hospitalization rates, you're seeing a slight tick up, but Omicron is nowhere near as dangerous as Delta. We are seeing these viruses get more and more mild. And if you take a look,
but the other thing about it that doesn't fit a political agenda is the treatments are getting better. So 2 years ago, time flies, you get COVID, you might be F'd if you're older or pre-existing conditions. Now, with, Pfizer has a bunch of treatments. I mean, it may be a year from now, even Bill Gates said in 2022, and maybe the end of the pandemic in terms of it'll be kind of like the flu.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And I mean, if you want to use the technical terms, we are moving from a pandemic to endemic. The virus is always going to be here, but it's not going to be as severe. We've gone from, oh my God, you have to go to the hospital, to the doctor can give you a test, hand you a prescription, and you can take some pills at home and be fine. And if you take a look at the infection rates, the states and cities with the most draconian lockdowns, with the most draconian mandates, they're the ones that have the highest rates. The places where mask mandates have been removed, where life is getting back to normal, they have lower infection rates. Why?
Okay, and
Because
let me just
your
have an
immune
let me
system works when it's infected.
okay, let me interject something. I will draw a parallel to global warming. It's the open door syndrome with liberalism. Is you have a pandemic, and what does that represent? Because they're always looking for opportunities, an opportunity for control of people. You have global warming. You have heightened. You have the tornadoes. In Tennessee. What does that represent? That represents more control of our economic system. It's never about protection with the Democrats. It's about control, and that's where we are. So
Okay,
it's never about. Go ahead.
I'm actually going to say we need to switch one term there. It's not the Democrats, it's the liberals, because the Democratic governor of Colorado has already come out and said, no, these mandates need to end. We are not enforcing any mandates that the federal government put forward. You're starting to see the same thing in New York. 25% of the county executives have said, no, we are not going to enforce the governor's mandates. So you're
Agreed.
starting to see Democrats come forward and say, no, enough is enough. We need to get back to normal.
Okay, I'll give you that one. But do you agree? And you don't have to believe me with my assertion. I believe with your refinement, liberalism always looks for control.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's an old political saying, you never waste a crisis. People were willing to give away their freedoms to get through this crisis. And now they're finding that the liberals don't want to give their freedoms back.
No. Well, last talking point is Omar, our buddy, our congressional buddy from Minnesota. I have no idea how that happened. We had a Republican that was a little bit out of line, made some negative comments, a little bit Islamophobic. So the Democrats were quick to introduce potential legislation, basically monitoring legislation about Islamophobia. Where were the Democrats with the anti-Semitism? That kind of didn't really go anywhere, did it?
No, yeah, they're really quick to defend Omar, but every time she makes an anti Semitic comment, every time the squad members attack Jews, they're suddenly very quiet. This is liberal hypocrisy at its best. And I mean, thank God, whatever legislation they try to pass, it's going to die in the Senate.
Nowhere. But there's a serious issue. We're from Connecticut, and you have Dan Blumenthal, Richard Blumenthal, right?
Yep.
And he is always ready to see a camera on MSNBC. How come he doesn't speak out at all about the rampant anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party? How about Chuck Schumer?
Well,
I don't hear anything from him.
I think both Blumenthal and Schumer are terrified of the radical left. They want to stay on their good side. And Blumenthal showed this past weekend when he made an appearance at the Connecticut People's World Committee Amistad Awards. Now, the People's World Committee is an affiliate of the Communist Party. When did we stop standing up to the communists going, your way of life has failed, stop trying to bring it here? Now the Democrats are kowtowing to them.
Kowtowing, they're embracing them.
It is absolutely ridiculous. It is time to tell the liberal left that everything you are talking about has already failed. Stop pushing it. Come back with some realistic ideas, and maybe we'll listen. But the one thing that absolutely terrifies me is that these folks have pushed the pendulum so far to the left. I am actually afraid that when it does swing back, it's going to swing so far to the right that the wackos on the right are going to take control. And then we're going to have to fight them to try to bring this pendulum back to the center where it belongs.
Actually, Dr. Lopkin, that's what happens all the time. Look, the Weimar Republic in Germany, case in point. Dr. Lopkin, a great edition of Carnivore Radio, Carnivore Bites. We're going to take a little hiatus, but we're on a roll, and our listeners can listen to us in many opportunities, correct?
You can find us each episode at xvadio.com/podcast, as well as the Carnivore Radio website. You can find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Yes.
We're wishing all of our listeners a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, a Happy New Year, and we will see you in 2022.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners. Take care.
We'll see you next year.